How's it going, everybody? My name is Lee Woodmansey, and I'm the campus minister here at the Baptist Collegiate Ministry at the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. And you are catching us in the middle of episode 28 of The Link. And I want to explain what The Link is real quickly. The Link is a podcast we produce here at the BCM where we try to connect students with one of three things. We want to connect students with topics of theology and the practical outworking of that theology. We want to connect students with pastors and staff of churches in the area. And we want to connect students with faculty and administrators here at the university. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be keying in on that second group, but we're not talking about a church necessarily. We're actually going to be talking about somebody else who does college ministry here at the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. So I am actually joined by the guy who has been here, I think, like a week less than I have total, and he is none other than Clayton Helling. How are you, sir?
Hi.
Clayton, I am glad you are joining us. That's accurate, right? I was here about a week or so before you, and right. I think that was basically it. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So with that being said, give us a little bit of background information about who you are, wife, kiddos, where you're from, what part of the godforsaken country you're from.
Well, I don't think any part of the country is godforsaken.
Oh, okay, well, it depends on where you're from. Give us the answer first, and we'll find out.
Okay. Well, my name's Clayton, and I am a campus minister with Chi Alpha here at UAFS. I'm originally from Montana, is where I'm from.
Okay, well, that's not so bad.
It's not bad.
It's not Mississippi or anything like that.
There's more cows than people up there, so.
Some might say that's a good thing.
Some might say that's a good thing.
Did your family grow up ranching, or what?
Yeah, my uncle owned a ranch, and that was my first job, was irrigation, taking care of cattle, that kind of thing with my uncle. That was my first job, and then moved to that to working at a grocery store. And then after I graduated high school, went to the Air Force.
Okay. How long were you in the Air Force?
6 years.
6 years. Where all were you in the Air Force? Because when I was in the military for the Army, I went to some places, but it was only because I was going there, like, in Iraq. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to go to anywhere outside of, war. Right. But you were in some different places, right? That were a little more exotic. So where all were you?
Well, after doing training in Texas for what seemed like an eternity, I got out of Texas and I went straight to Aviano Air Base in Italy. And that's where I was for 2 years.
And what city is that closest to that we would recognize? Okay.
It's an Italian air base, and it's in the northeastern corner of Italy.
So you're closer to Florence and Venice than you are with Rome, which is further south.
We're about 2 hours west of Venice.
Okay, gotcha.
By train. I don't know how you calculate that.
On foot. How far is that on foot?
I didn't walk. So
okay, well, that's probably a wise choice. All right, rock on. So, hey, give us a little bit of information about who you are as far as your official capacity with Chi Alpha. Sure. What is Chi Alpha? What does that even mean? Give us a little bit of information about what you do professionally here working with college students.
Sure. Chi Alpha, well, first of all, it's like, what does the name mean? If you go to a fraternity or sorority, that's one of the first questions we get on campus. Are you a fraternity or sorority? We're like, no, not really, no. We're made up of a bunch of people that love Jesus. But, we'll tell you what our letters mean, and you won't get that from a fraternity or sorority. Well, Christou Apostoloi, It means Christ ambassadors. It comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. Mm-hmm. And it's saying, hey, I want you to be ambassadors on behalf of God and reconcile people to Christ. And so our call is to reconcile students to Christ. So that's the name, the identity, and that's, kind of our function is to reconcile people back to the Father.
Gotcha. So how long have you been working with college students in general, whether that's here at Fort Smith or elsewhere? How'd you get into the college ministry game? Because that's a little bit of a different route than most pastors get into pastoring.
Right. So how I got into it is, well, just backing up a little bit, when I was in the military, I ended up hitting full-blown depression, suicidal, you name it. And I was like, well, maybe God will do something with this life because I just want to throw it away. Maybe he'll do something with it. Walked in the doors of a church, found people head over heels in love with Jesus. And I was like, wow, this is something I've never experienced before. And I just gave my life to him. He says, here you go. And then got really involved in the church there.
What year was that?
That was 2005
when
that happened. And then in 2007, there was I'd call it an encounter with the Lord that changed my life forever. And that gave me a passion to be involved in ministry. And I stepped away from the Air Force and went to a Bible college. And it's at Bible college I heard about Chi Alpha. And then I had a friend of mine say, hey, you ought to come down here to Arkansas and talk to this guy at Fayetteville named Ronnie Hoover. And he'll tell you more about Chi Alpha. And so I did. And I went to the U of A and ended up doing an internship there from 2013 to 2015 is what I did there. And it was about the same time that you were there. And during that time, I was making trips down here to UAFS to help out with a group of students that were just doing Chi Alpha on their own. And they were needing help, and I felt impressed the Lord to come and help them out. And says, and I became their first full-time Chi Alpha staff at that point.
Yeah, and I think, how long has Chi Alpha been running here at UA Fort Smith, whether it's with someone in your position or not? How long has that been?
It's been going on and off for the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years. It would get started sometimes out of a church, or some individual come by and say that they were trying to do Chi Alpha, but it was never something that was being sustained. It wasn't until Ronnie got involved 5 years prior to me showing up that there was a group of 4 students that got together and contacted him to where it became sustainable, and it lasted. And then I, showed up in 2013. Just, hey, I'm here to help. In whatever capacity that you'll allow me to serve.
Gotcha.
So, and then I got down here full time in 2015, as I was still a missionary associate at that time.
Gotcha. So the title's changed a little bit, but
Yeah.
the role and the function really
Right.
hasn't.
It's
Gotcha.
It's all formality stuff.
Gotcha. And so that's where you serve as far as like an official capacity with the campus ministry. But what about your church, your local church? What church are you a member of? Where do you regularly attend?
Sure. Well, Chi Alpha's affiliated with the Assemblies of God, and they have us attend Assemblies of God Church when we're here in the local area, and I attend Van Buren First Assemblies, where I attend.
And where's that at physically?
So you know where Fayetteville Road is in Van Buren? You go right on top of the hill, and that's where VBFA is at.
Yeah, you sit on top of the hill in that
Literally
regard.
on top of the hill.
Yeah, that's one of the appealing things for churches that are a little bit older. They're normally in like prominent locations, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Rock on. All right, so we've kind of covered how you got into ministry and a little bit of your path towards being here at Chi Alpha.
Sure.
So let's talk about Chi Alpha as a whole, as far as from like a student's perspective. If they were a first-time visitor to roll into one of y'all's gatherings, what would they see? What can they anticipate seeing? We can talk about, worship style, your preaching style, like how's all that work? I know it's going to be a little bit different because of COVID and that kind of jazz, but on a normal occurrence, what is it that they could expect coming into your ministry?
Sure. Well, there's 3 key concepts that we revolve around in Chi Alpha. And this was developed out of the Conway Chi Alpha, and it's been adopted, I think, nationwide at this point. And the 3 key concepts are worship, family, and mission. That when you first encounter people that are in Chi Alpha, you'll find people that are head over heels in love with Jesus, much like my experience was when I went to the church. It's like, hey, I want to find people that are head over heels in love with this God that I don't know anything about, this Jesus. And it's one of the first experiences that I think people come into. So if they were to walk into, and usually we have, in the campus centers where we're at specifically, and they'll run into people that are walking up to them, greeting them, saying hi, this kind of deal, and asking them the typical questions, where you're from, not a fake friendly, but being friendly on the sake of, this is someone valued by God. And it's the aspect of worship is realizing is if God feels that way about me, that means he feels way about every single person that we come in contact with. You're not going to, like the pastor of the church that I attend, he says, you'll never lock eyes with the person that Jesus doesn't love.
I like that.
And valuing the person for the sake of, okay, I've received the love that God has for me, and I'm going to extend it to someone else. And that's kind of the attitude that we give, when we're talking to leaders and students that are already involved, inviting new people is, hey, we want to share that with people. We want to be an extension of the love of God to someone else.
Gotcha. And so how would you describe just like the worship style, the setting that you all find yourselves in? I know it's a little bit limiting because you're in a space that's on campus, but like what are they going to anticipate? Because if a student is coming from a very traditional church background, it might be something that's really encouraging. It may not be. What would you describe as far as the worship style, your preaching style, that might be encouraging for students to hear?
Well, we bust out the pews and the hymnals.
There it is.
I'm joking.
There it is.
No, that's what I grew up with. I grew up with a traditional style, even though, coming from a charismatic Pentecostal brand, I guess you would call it. But that was the format really. Is you come sit down, you read your page numbers, whatever. We don't do that.
Y'all actually use technology.
We use technology. We got a screen, and we've got a live, the worship team that's there. We got some equipment that was generously donated by the youth of the Arkansas Assemblies of God Church as the youth group, they would raise money so that we could have sound equipment. That's all of our stuff is actually raised through a program called Speed the Light. And the style really, I mean, I guess you call it contemporary worship, or I don't know what you would classify it as, but we hear songs that, and this is my rule for the worship team. I don't want to sing songs that are about me. I don't want to sing songs that are about my problems, because what I sing about, I worship. I want to sing songs that actively engage people in praying to God. Mm-hmm. That's a prayer put to music. That we're trying to draw people into the presence of God, and that's the goal. That's the goal of any worship set. So it says, guys, when we sing, we're singing to Him, and we're singing before an audience of one. And so, if that's a style, I guess that's.
Well, I mean, the mindset, I think that's categorically different than what you might run into at the normal church. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I pick up on whenever, just even whenever I taught for you there this last semester, and having been at one of y'all's worship gatherings, like there's intentionality. I think that might be the word that we would use, is that you don't pick songs just flippantly. You don't pick them based upon how they sound. Right. You pick them based upon what it moves you towards. Right. And moving you towards worship is what the premium that y'all have placed in y'all's worship. Yeah. So would you say that kind of bleeds over into your preaching style and how it is that you teach? How would you explain that? Yeah. And I know you don't like turning the spotlight on yourself in that regard, but just for information, how would you describe that?
As far as preaching goes, I'm not the best preacher in the world. I'm not, and I would never pretend to be. I just all I would classify myself as is a believer, and a believer will share what they believe. Mm-hmm. and that's just what I leave it at. As far as like style, if you're trying to use like the big hairy words or whatever, am I using expository, topical? I usually do a blend of all of them. All the three different ones. I don't do a manuscript very much. Some Jonathan Edwards kind of stuff, and I don't do that. And sinners in the hands of an angry God.
Right.
You're just a spider.
You're not out there shaking your fists a whole lot.
No. I don't do probably what you would imagine is the atypical. If you go to an Assembly of God church or something, that somebody might have this thought. Well, those are the people that yell, spit, and scream, and whatever. I don't really do that. That's not really in my personality. I try to be as much of myself as I possibly can, mm-hmm. because I wouldn't want to listen to somebody that wasn't themselves. Yeah. If they're just putting on a show, I'm just like, I'm out. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical that, like, even as just we evaluate what college students are looking for when it comes to community with other believers, like, I think especially this generation puts a high prize on authenticity. Mm-hmm. And so anything that, even sniffs of inauthentic activity, whether it be worship, preaching, reading, hanging out, whatever it is, they're immediately turned off. Yeah, so I think that's one of the great benefits that you have, is just like from that very beginning mindset of like, I'm just not going to approach anything we do in worship in a way that's going to detract from the main focus of worship. And I'll go ahead and link in the description here, or in the cards from whenever you preached here. And I know our students responded well for just the way that you engaged with telling your story and actually relating not just to what you were preaching about, but like why what you were preaching about matters. And I know several of your students who are involved there in Chi Alpha, and I've never heard students say, yeah, I mean, it's great, but that Clayton guy, we could do better. Like, that's never been said. And so, I mean, for what that's worth, you could take that as an encouragement.
I pay them well.
Yeah, okay, well, hey, then maybe I should start doing that. Rock on. Well, hey, so let's talk about your ministry just a little bit differently then. So we kind of understand exactly what it is y'all do. You have songs. It's not just this formulaic rolling out of people hanging out together. Right. Like, you're not after that. But what is it that makes your ministry unique? You mentioned earlier about how, everyone has this really loving sense of community and people who love Jesus. Right. Would you say that that's like the defining characteristic of your ministry, or is there something different that you would say that we do that 100 other groups may not do?
See, for me, that's kind of a weird question, because we're all one family.
Okay.
I'm probably, well, let's put it this way. Back when I was in New Mexico, and because I'd come from a church experience or whatever, and one of the reasons why I fell away from Christ, didn't want anything to do with Jesus or anything like that, was one of the largest reasons was because of denominational lines. Mm-hmm. Because I was like, if Jesus has a body, many parts, and they're all united, and I look at the world and I look at the church and I see it so split up, that was one of the biggest offenses that I had.
It was like a literal stumbling block
It
for
was
you wanting to come to Christ and seeing that. Yeah.
It was kind of like the analogy I use with students is like, you can't, when you get married, you can't love your spouse's head and not like her body. It's like, he died for her. He cherishes his bride. And so to talk about the bride of Christ in a way that says, one is superior than the other, there's a distinction. There's different functions for sure. Like my pinky and my thumb, they my eye, my liver, they all have different functions. So it's kind of an awkward way for me to like, how are you distinctive? So it's like, well, if I was a pancreas, what would I do? Okay, insulin. So I guess if you're asking a question like that, like as a pancreas or whatever, what do I provide for the body? So I'll answer it that way instead of being like, well, we do this and you don't.
Yeah.
I got all these verses from 1 Corinthians 12, come in my brain. But no, the thing that I think has been a defining factor in, Chi Alpha, or particularly this group or whatever, is the children of Israel. They camped around not a service, not a song, not a person. They camped around a presence. They camped around the presence of God. And it's like if we're going to camp around something, that's what it's going to be. That's what my conviction is. That's where I see the Word of God leading us, is like, where's the presence of God in this, and that's what we'll camp around. And so as far as like a distinctive in Chi Alpha, maybe that's it. I don't know. But coming from a lot of, whenever I get around other campus ministers, they'll usually say something like, well, you charismatics and Pentecostals, I'm like, what does that even mean? So I'm just like, I get, it's like, there's some very charismatic people in the Bible. And obviously there's some very Pentecostal people in the Bible, because that's where we get the whole idea from. And I think what they're trying to say is that people that are free in their worship to where they're able to express themselves emotionally, probably where they feel limited elsewhere.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that was actually where I was going to lead to this, is that I think one way to kind of formulate that question is, what is it that is maybe distinct about this group that affects the way that you worship Jesus?
Okay.
And I think right there, you just hit on it, is like, well, we feel a little bit more freedom maybe than another group might. And that's, good, bad, or indifferent.
Sure.
That's not really necessarily the point. But like, I could see that even from whenever I've been there with y'all services, or whenever we've done stuff on campus together, like that's something that is, visible. It's something that's objective that we can see in many ways. Is that something that y'all had to work at cultivating, or is that kind of come natural because of your leadership, or because of the way that the group has kind of been stitched together? How's that come about?
It wasn't necessarily something like, okay, here's the guidelines on how we're going to do worship. We didn't really have to do that. What I tell the worship leaders is like, you're leading worship, so worship, and that's how you lead. This is like, so if you want to see somebody exhibit a behavior that you're looking for, you have to you have to show that example. You have to model it yourself. And so I think it's just been by model, and creating an atmosphere for people and say, hey, you're free. It's like, if we sit there and not get to a portion where I'm, speaking and teaching or whatever, that's fine. If we're following the presence of God and we want to sit here and just sing this song 100 times, whatever, and people are getting blessed and people are getting touched. Let's put it this way. The presence of God will do more in 5 seconds I'll do in 5 lifetimes. And so I will get out of the way for the Holy Spirit to do something in someone's life.
Right.
And we've created an atmosphere to where that can happen.
Yeah. And I know that you would just, even based off of what you just said, that's not to say that other churches don't do that, or that they're incapable. But I mean, objectively, I would say y'all are more likely to do so. And I think that's kind of partly just sensibilities, partly just, background and just where y'all are. But I mean, that doesn't mean good, bad, or indifferent that you're doing anything better or worse than anyone else. For sure.
And that goes back before. It's like when you're asked, oh, how does that make it doesn't make us any better or whatever. It might make us different.
Right.
But I'm like, I've been to services like, what you guys do, and I mean, I've been to so many different denominations because I get invited, or go someplace or whatever. For example, I think one of the places I went to is I went to a mostly elderly church service, and they busted out the hymns, and stuff like that. And I kind of started having flashbacks. Oh no, but those people worshipped in such a way that I was almost a puddle on the floor because it was genuine.
Yeah,
and it wasn't so much about the style or whatever it was. It was just that it was genuine. So if people are genuinely chasing God, no matter what the format or style is like, hey, let's do it.
Yeah, I think I could piggyback off of that with just an experience with me of like, I mean, because I preach in, small churches, on a fairly regular basis. And in the last couple of times I've gone, like, it's been, everyone has a hymnal, and the way that they select songs is they just kind of basically like take requests.
Yeah.
And, for someone that comes from my background where we like to have everything planned and everything, that's something within me is like, man, that doesn't seem very good. But then the moment that you hear everybody worshiping, it's exactly the thing you're talking about, like the authenticity of how they're worshiping. Like, just because they did it differently doesn't mean that it's better or worse. And in fact, that humbles me to say, well, maybe me planning it isn't the best thing either. Like, that doesn't necessarily make it better. It's just different. So yeah, I mean, I think that is beneficial because, I mean, I think there are good reasons to understand denominational distinctives so that you kind of understand what you're getting into whenever you first show up. But as well as I do, denominational distinctives kind of put you in a category, but even in that big category, there's so much leeway into how everything could actually bust out that it almost at some level just serves as like a nominal purpose, and that's basically it. Yeah. All right, rock on. So here, let me move on to our next question that really kind of focuses on y'all's ministry here right now, even in the time of COVID. Is there something that's going on with y'all's ministry that has you excited about what God's doing? Is that something new that's happened over the last year or so? Is it something that's been building over the last several? Or if it's something that you couldn't have anticipated, is there something that you're excited about that God's doing in your ministry that you can look at and say, I'm ready to hop on board with whatever God's doing there?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 presented a whole bunch of challenges.
Yes, sir.
Last semester, I mean, come March, I mean, everything just got put on hold as far as doing stuff in person or whatever. But our leadership, as far as Chi Alpha said, say, hey, if we're led by the Spirit, then that means that nothing's impossible. So just go for whatever you're going to be allowed to do, and that's safe within reason, all those things. And so we're like, okay. And so we just elected to, once we knew that the fall was going to start, we tried to do as much stuff we could through the summer, because then our summer missions project was basically put on hold. Even though it was we were getting it off the ground, we were going to take a trip over to a sensitive country and do all that stuff, and that got put on hold. Yeah, we went right into the fall making plans like, hey, we're going to do as much in person as we possibly can. If we got a student showing up, then we're going to be there for them. And we found out there was going to be students on campus. And so we're like, well, do we sit there and do just a strictly online thing? Do we do, so my thing was like, let's just cast the net and see what happens. And so the fall became an experiment.
Right.
And it's like, it was going to take a risk. And it says, we're going to still attempt to do stuff in person. And what we found is that we were one of the only ones doing that as far as doing almost exclusively most of our stuff in person. We did some stuff online, but I just found that a lot of people got, and I'm not saying I think this is great. I think what you've done here is awesome. And it's just kind of like another part of the body for me. It's just like, this needs to be out there. But for us, it was like, we're going to try to do as much as we can in person. And so we went and we launched out with that. And to our surprise, man, we had a lot of students react positively to that, and they started showing up. And so for us, it was almost like a normal semester in the midst of crazy, which really didn't make sense. And then when we started wrapping up this semester and going into the next, it's like, well, we're just going to keep rolling that direction. And I'm really excited because for people that are kind of been accustomed to sitting in front of a screen and doing everything out of your church service, classes, all those things, and making in-person stuff more available, within reason, being safe, following the guidelines, we don't want to do anything that's going to put somebody in harm or put them in trouble or whatever. But we find that students are hungry for discipleship.
Yes. That hadn't changed.
They are hungry for discipleship. And when we look at the model of Jesus, I if you haven't got a chance, I don't know if you've watched it yet or not, but if you've seen the series The Chosen. So
I'm familiar.
It's great. It's great. And so they're basically, it's one of the very first crowd-funded depictions of Jesus and the disciples.
Okay.
And so I tell students, if you're going to watch something on a screen,
available through
on everything.
Okay.
You can go check YouTube. They got their own website or whatever, and it's just a depiction of Jesus. And I tell them, it says, if you're going to watch entertainment, don't binge Netflix. Go watch The Chosen. And what you see in there is these people being picked out, and it would give them a new passion for watching or being involved in the Bible and in the model of Jesus. And I'm like, that's what we're after. And one of the questions that one of the students asked is, well, if Jesus reacted to these people called lepers in such a way that, there wasn't a guideline or a barrier that kept him from touching them, that he believed in the power of the Holy Spirit to do things. It's like, that was kind of a challenge to us. And so that's what I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Jesus is going to do. Living in a Babylon, and you have to dress like the Babylonians sometimes, and that kind of thing. Daniel was blameless before Babylon in their laws, but there was times that he just wouldn't cross that line. And that's kind of been our response. It's like, we're going to do everything to benefit Babylon as much as we possibly can, but there's going to be lines that we will not cross or whatever. But we've never been presented with anything like that would be preventative of us abiding by anything.
Right.
But I'm excited to see what God's going to do in the midst of all that, because I really do believe that God is a part of what's been going on this past year, that he's shaking things, and that things that cannot be shaken, they're remaining, and they're staying, and realizing people are becoming hungry for something that's real and genuine. I'm excited for the model of Jesus, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think just to kind of round out everything I've seen y'all do this semester, I mean, I think of the major campus ministries that are here at UA Fort Smith, y'all are the ones that are most physically present on campus on a more routine basis. And it's a little different for us because we have a building and we're off campus, but I mean, that has its, more limitations than I think a lot of people might recognize. But for y'all, like, that hasn't been a limitation for you. The fact that you are relegated to being at different places on campus is actually a strength. That means that you're more visible in different ways. So what is that like for y'all? Like, has there been a lot of frustration having to bounce around in different locations? Because I know that there's a balance of the practicality with where you really are, but at the same time, like, if you're excited about these things, then I haven't seen that really be a barrier to your joy in ministry in this.
No, it's like I would tell people before, it's like we're happy to serve the campus in whatever fashion that they'll allow us. We'll just tell them, hey, we want to serve you, we want to love on you, and we're talking about the campus administration, faculty, all of that, serve you in whatever capacity. And it's like all we're really asking for is, hey, we'll preach the gospel out of a janitor's closet. We don't care. If we have to sit there and not have a room reservation, we'll make it work somehow. But going from room to room, we've organized all of our stuff to be mobile, and so for us, it's like, okay. And sometimes it gets confusing for students. Well, I thought you were meeting here. It's like, whatever. So we just have to work harder at our advertising, and we're kind of like learning from you guys. How do we have an online presence to let people know what's going on? And so you're really helping us out and, showing an example for us how to do that.
Well, I think everybody's had to grow in one way or another with that. Yeah. And I mean, I still feel like we miss more times than we hit. But at the same token, I would say just, as an encouragement, the way that I see y'all consistently being visible on campus, like, I've never had a problem with, like, if I wanted to find out where you were, granted, I'm kind of in the know, but at the same time, like, it's not hard.
Yeah.
It's not a difficult thing to actually do. So I just wanted to kind of just, pick your brain there, because I do think that that's beneficial for you to hear that, like, from someone else from the outside looking in, that, like, I feel like what y'all are doing is well done, and that it's actually something that is beneficial to the university, is beneficial to students. And then if that's something that you're excited about, then, man, I think that's where you go hard charging for there.
Well, thank you.
All right, well, then let me let you toot your horn. I know you don't like doing this, but let me just ask it this way. Why should a college student come check out a service with Chi Alpha? Why should somebody come hang out with y'all? Why should somebody get connected with your students and your leaders? Why would you want them to do that?
I always tie it back to my story. A lot of times, is in that when I was your age, when I was 20, 21 years old, I was lost. I was one of those students walking across campus. Granted, I was in the military or whatever, but it was the same journey that I was on, and I was searching. I was looking for something. Did I know what I was looking for? No. I just knew that there had to be more than what I experienced. There had to be more than going to work every day and earning a paycheck and coming home or whatever. And when I pursued Christ and I found that, man, there was more in Christ than I ever thought possible. That what do I want them to experience? What do I want them to come to? I want them to come into an encounter with Jesus. Because unless there's that encounter with Jesus, it's just a club.
Right.
It's just an old book.
A social function, maybe.
Function. I've heard this way, Bible study without Bible experience is a fraud. that if we read the pages of the Bible, it's like we should experience the pages of the Bible. And that's the core central thing is like we want to read about this Jesus. We want to learn as much as we can about him, but we also want to meet him. You know, I'll tell students, you know, they're like, oh, I'm an atheist or I'm agnostic or whatever. And, well, you know, you have your belief system and, you know, don't judge me. It's like, well, there's no judgment. I says, how could I possibly judge you on the basis of, you know, I can't judge you for, you know, someone you haven't met.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, Jesus is a person. And in him is the fullness of joy and pleasures evermore.
Right.
You know, it's just like that's the encounter we want to draw people into. So as far as Kyle, for our goal, it's just that. If I can get you to encounter Jesus, then it's not going to be my persuasive speaking. It's not going to be the community only. It's not going to be any of those things.
As advantageous as those things may be,
Yeah.
that's not the linchpin here.
Yeah, that's not. It's like, can I draw somebody into the presence of God? Is that what we are camping around? Can I draw somebody into experience with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for to y'all's benefit is, I mean, the way that y'all have tailored your ministry is to get people to that point where they experience not how great a preacher you are, not how great your band is, not how great the projector works, or whatever
If
silly
we
things,
have a projector that
whatever
night.
silly things that we may, you know, surround ministry with. Because at the end of the day, like being reliant upon the Holy Spirit and His activity to draw people to the Son is what you bank on. So it's not like, you know, what other artifice could we build up to say, well, that's actually what gets people in here to believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
That's just not how it works, right? And I think that, you know, someone mature in their faith and leading y'all's ministry, understanding that means that y'all are necessarily going to do things a little bit differently. I think whenever you were talking about Jesus as a person, one thing my pastor said, and I don't know if he came up with it or somebody else that he picked it up from, whatever, but he says there are two things that changes everything. One, God is real, and two, Jesus is alive.
That's right.
You know, and if he's alive, then everything changes in that regard.
That's right.
So, rock on. How else would you want to pitch Chi Alpha or just in general college ministry for a college student here at UA Fort Smith specifically? Because we kind of talked about in generalities about encountering Jesus, but what would be your final words you would say for college students here at UA Fort Smith that you would say, hey, come hang out with us?
Sure. Like we try to advertise as much as we can when we're meeting on Monday nights, because that's usually when we have our large group meeting. But like you've said before, we bank more on the small group discipleship more than anything else. And so, you know, we're kind of a collective of small groups. You want to look at it that way. The model of Jesus wanted to change the world, so he made 12 friends. And one of them betrayed him, you know. So it's like, so when we try to use metrics, be like, oh, how many people came? It was like, well, you know, he had 11 show up and he changed, you know, the world forever, you know. It's like, so is numbers really where it's at, or is it obedience, you know? And that's kind of what I want to gauge our success off, is how obedient we are. You know, I'm not saying that others are disobedient. I'm just like, I just try to follow them as best we can. But Monday nights, we try to meet in Campus Center 129 is where we try to meet most often. If that doesn't happen, usually they put us in Flanders 100.
Yeah.
But that could change at any given moment when we try to get that as much as we can. But why would somebody want to come to Chi Alpha? I mean, if you find yourself at a point where, you know, I want to experience Jesus, and who doesn't want to experience Jesus or whatever, in a way that is tailored for the model of Jesus specifically. I mean, that's our aim.
Mm-hmm.
That's our aim with that. And that looks like, you know, our style of worship, the way that we encounter each other in family, and also our mission. You know, we're not just trying to have the behavior modification club.
Right.
You know, come in, you know, you know, have you heard of Ravi Zacharias?
Yeah.
He passed
Recently
away.
died. Yep.
Recently passed away, but he would say this, see if I can get the quote right. He says, Jesus did not come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's sort of what we're going for. You know, it's like realizing that without Christ, there's no hope.
Yeah. And I would just kind of add to that, you know, only because you haven't explicitly said it, but just kind of to tee you up for this. Just because you are somebody who is an atheist or someone who is agnostic, that doesn't mean that, well, because I'm not being obedient to Christ right now and that's what your group's about, well, then I'm not allowed there. Like, no, like, come see, observe, see that there is something grander for you. And it's not based upon your activity. It's based upon relationship there, and that all lies behind what y'all do, but maybe it's not explicitly said. So saying it now, I think, is just beneficial for us to see how welcoming you are.
It's the taste and see that the Lord is good. The taste and see that the Lord is good. It's, perception and experience, putting the two. And, like I was with our mission, trying to get the word out, especially that's part of our mission is inviting people. They're like, I'm not an outsider, atheist, agnostic, whatever. It's like, no, come. We want you to hang out. We want you to ask the hard questions. All of those things.
Right.
Pitch what you got. It's like when we may not have the answer, but we know the answer.
Right.
And we can ask together. But yeah, try to definitely as much as Jesus is exclusive, he's inclusive.
Yes. Right. And I think that's one of the things that, I think we could say about all of our major campus ministries here is that no one's going to be turning anybody away. But I think just to be a cheerleader for you guys, like, there's hardly anyone who is as visible on campus as you are. So, I think that would be something that would be remiss for us to not highlight that and say, like, there are people who are physically on campus in the buildings of campus saying, we want you to come hang out with us regardless of what your background may be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Rock on. Well, hey, that's what we wanted to talk about with your ministry. And now I want to turn the last question really on you in particular. There's one question I always ask for folks who are here on the podcast. And I just want to know, what are you listening to right now? What artist, genre, band, anybody individually? Is there a podcast that really sticks out? Right now we're recording this, about a week or so before Christmas.
Right.
And so Spotify just did their year-end wrap-up. And so maybe there's something that you gleaned from that maybe you hadn't anticipated. Tell us what you're into right now. What's on your playlist?
Well, I'll start with podcasts. I listen.
Is any of this going to be embarrassing? Because that's even better. If it's,
no,
if it
it's
is.
not. It's not embarrassing. I don't think so. Anyway. So as far as like podcasts go, I listen to a lot of podcasts driving back and forth. I usually get a sermon in. I'll get one half of it driving in, the other half going out.
Which is the optimal way to listen to sermons. By the way,
like, how do I respond? I don't know yet. I got to wait for the drive home. But I listen to a lot of stuff by Bethel.
Okay.
The International House of Prayer, different
up in Kansas City.
Kansas City, different speakers there. I listen to a couple different churches. John and Lisa Bevere conversations. It's literally just like this format. If you know who John and Lisa Bevere are, just a gift to the body of Christ, and they, the different resources they have. I listen to a lot of that. As far as music, a lot of Bethel stuff, especially the newest album that they've come out. Revivals in the Air album by Bethel Music. That one I pretty much have on repeat in my car right now constantly. And I haven't really gone anywhere from that because if something leads me into the presence of God, I'm just like, okay, I'm stuck, or whatever. But yeah, that's what I'm listening to.
So if you're not listening to Christian-ish type stuff, whether it's a podcast or music or whatever, is there another go-to that you're drawn back into with your country music background?
I don't have a country music
background. Don't lie to us.
No. So have you told them your opinion of country music?
Oh, I can tell it right now. Let me say this. Right here. I believe country music has added nothing to art in general and therefore should just be done away with. There it is.
Yeah. I don't listen to country music.
Well, praise God for that.
No. See, and that's kind of the assumption. When you grow up in Montana, of course you listen to country music. No.
Right. You worked at a ranch, man. There's no way you could have avoided it, right?
No, I didn't listen.
Well, y'all didn't have electricity in Montana, so that helps.
We overcame somehow. But no. So, no, I listen to a lot of older music if I'm not listening to Christian, but really it's mostly worship music. I'm not trying to be like holy or whatever, but it's just, that's just what I listen to. But if there's like a go-to, if I'm just like goofing off with the kids in the car or whatever, Three Dog Night will come on.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And we'll sing about Joy to the World and Jeremiah was a bullfrog and all that stuff just for fun.
Gotcha. I don't know if we actually mentioned this. How many kiddos do you have?
I've got two.
Yeah.
As of right now, we have our son Flint. He's 2, and then Liv. She is 5 months old.
And you hadn't quite got that stage where like they're able to make requests, but my kids are. And on my Spotify year-end review, there's definitely quite a few Disney songs because with 3 daughters, princess songs are at a premium in my truck, which is just great. I mean, I love hearing my kids sing. So I'm looking forward to that for you. Hopefully you can kind of lean in on the 3-dog night a little bit more with them instead of Disney songs. So don't go down that path.
We do have one Disney song we always do.
Oh, which one's that?
Oh, it's the Circle of Life.
Oh yeah,
You
that's a
have to
good
do
one.
Circle of Life.
No one knows exactly how to pronounce whatever
It's
words those are.
Pink pajamas, penguins on the bottom.
Okay.
That's the only part that I know how to actually say the words.
Well, that's actually the lyrics.
That's actually
because
lyrics.
that's what you should be saying.
That's what you should be
There's unequivocally that is precisely what we should be saying during that time. Well, Clayton, you've already kind of told us about y'all meet on Monday nights at various locations. What other kind of last spiel you want to give about Instagram or whatever? And I'll put the link for all their Instagram stuff down below as well.
One of the key things that we're wanting to get involved with is, the mission of God, not only just here locally at the campus, but also abroad. And, it's like, well, how's that going to happen with 2020? Well, we're going to do stuff locally or whatever, but go to sensitive countries, those kind of things. That's kind of what we're headed towards. Other than what we do here locally on the campus, we want to take it internationally when we can, when the guidelines lift and those things. And especially, you got our spring break that was coming up. We've talked about doing something
right,
collaborative,
whatever that's going to look like.
Whatever that's going to look like. So, but typically, But yeah, if you want to get a hold of us, we got our Facebook page. Because we're old school. Fort Smith Chi Alpha at Fort Smith Chi Alpha. That's the primary means. We do have an Instagram. I think it's at UAFS Chi Alpha. No, it's at Fort Smith Chi Alpha. We changed it.
Oh.
We learned how to change our domain because I was like, why do we have 2 different ones? At Fort Smith Chi Alpha, all spelled out.
I've had that fight this whole time.
Instagram and Facebook. So we've kind of had to up our game a little bit as far as online presence. But yeah, if you want to find out what we're doing, where we're at, those are the primary means.
Rock on. Cool. Well, with that being said, I'm just thankful that you guys are doing ministry here with us here in Fort Smith. I know that a lot of times, like, the perception is because there are people doing college ministry at a smaller college, that would necessarily mean that the folks who run that ministry kind of view each other as competition. Man, that's never been the case.
No.
It's never been the case. At the end of the day, we need more people telling students about Jesus. And for folks that are, sold out to being devoted to Christ and his glory, like, I couldn't ask for a better partner in that way. So I'm thankful for you guys. I'm glad you were here. Any other parting shots you want to give everybody?
Well, it's just what you just said there. My favorite analogy is like when Jesus had the disciples and he met with them, those fishermen. He's got Peter and Andrew in one boat, and he's got James and John in another boat. And when they caught a catch that was too large for one boat to carry, they had to ask for their partners in ministry to come alongside to bring in the catch. And that's the way I view campus ministry at UAFS, is that we're just in different boats, but we're after the same catch to bring to the same Lord. And that is one of the things that I champion about UAFS when I get to talk to the other Chi Alphas and the other campus ministers around the state or nation or whatever. It's like, I love the fact that Lee Woodmansey at the BCM is there for me no matter what. You're a constant encouragement to me. Not only just as, a fellow minister, but as a friend. And I love the fact that you're doing this. I love it.
Gotcha. Well, hey, it's easy to do, and it's easy to want to do
Yeah.
whenever I'm working with folks that we love and that are doing the same thing we're doing. So, yeah, rock on. Well, if you got anything else, I'm sure that we can get contact information down to you guys. You can check down in the description down beneath this video, or if you're listening on just the podcast after the fact, we'll have it in the show notes below. But yeah, rock on. We'll get all that information there, and I hope folks listen to this and are spurred on to want to meet with y'all on Mondays whenever we fire back up in the semester.
Yeah, likewise.
Rock on. Well, I just want to say thank you one more time. And we always end with a benediction of sorts with what we do here. And it's real simple. And it's this. It's by saying, do good and don't sin.